I am so honored and thankful to be a part of this session. And I am very familiar with LifeWorks leadership in terms of your principles and what you're attempting to do. And may God continue to bless you and honor this movement as he works in and through you. As I sat here and I listened and I heard the different comments, it helped me to reflect on really a foundational principle that has shaped my life around integrity. And as I think before I go into that, I want you to know the foundation of who I am, and to have my lovely wife here with me of 36 years is truly a blessing. To know that as a father, as a son, as a husband, as a grandson, as a brother, that my life matters. The integrity of my life matters. And today I want to talk to you really about three situations or three life's journeys that reflect on how the Lord has really been working in my life around this issue of integrity. And so I'm going to talk to you a little bit about some early years in my life and that foundational being shaped. Secondly, I'm going to talk to you about the marketplace and how it shaped my life within the marketplace. And third, I'm going to talk to you probably about the most important one, which is family. Family to me is the very rock and foundation that my life has been really built on and I want to see as a legacy as I move forward. But first, I want to give you a principle that everything is shaped on, everything is founded on, everything is balanced on. And you may want to take some notes on these three things because it may challenge your biblical principle. It may challenge your theology. It may challenge your integrity as you look at life. And here's the foundation that I want you to remember, if you remember nothing else from this talk today. The first foundational thought is that in the fall, we lost it all. We lost all moral ability to have integrity or any type of goodness in our life, any type of honesty in our life, any capabilities of walking this life out in a form of goodness. Some don't believe that we lost it all. Some believe that we lost a little bit. Some might even believe that we lost a lot. But the foundation that has changed my life and has shaped it at the very core is the foundation that we lost it all in the fall. But that leads me to good news. Therefore, I have to believe that when Christ came, when he hung on the cross, he did it all. He didn't just do a little bit. He didn't just do a lot. He did it all. And so when we're facing situations, as Patrick has shared with us today, and all of us have faced, we can turn to the cross as the place that we remember that this Christ has done it all. The third principle that I want you to remember, not only did you lose it all and he did it all, there's great news for you. You get it all. You don't just get a little bit. You don't get just a lot. You get it all. As a citizen of his kingdom, he has given you a little bit of inheritance now, but he has given you eternity forever. That is a life worth living. And so early in life, there was a lesson that was taught. Interesting enough, by my father, but also by a neighbor. And so when I think about this, maybe 6, 7, 8 years old, this lesson is one. And I believe integrity is a decision that you make once, but you manage it daily for a lifetime. That decision you make once, to have faith, to believe that the Lord is who he say he is, did what he say he did, and you know that he is who he say he is, and therefore, by faith and by grace, you have been saved. Therefore, I can live this life of integrity, not because of what I do, but because of what he's done. It's a foundational principle that I believe, absence of, you will always be searching for that hole in the middle that can never be filled. So I will start out with this thought. Have you ever achieved your most wondrous dreams and desires? Because you guys are business people and pastors. Think about this thought. You have in your heart a dream and desire that is so great and so bold that you want to make a difference, you want to have impact. But imagine that you accomplish that most wondrous dream and desire, and it leaves you empty and unfulfilled inside. What happens at that point? Where do you search for? Who do you search for at that point? When you achieve the most wondrous dreams and desires of your life, but it leaves you empty and unfulfilled. Well, let me start you in my journey. 6, 7 years old, I had a neighbor, and Mr. Santos. Mr. Santos, I grew up in Chicago, Illinois, and Mr. Santos lived next door. He had an amazing apple tree. This apple tree produced a lot of fruit. Fruit that I wanted to partake in. And as a young boy, there was a fence, and I hopped over the fence, and when I felt he wasn't looking, his kind of picture mirror was kind of a window right there that he could look out, but when the curtains were closed, it was my opportunity to practice. And I hopped over the fence and I ran, but I only partook of the fruit that had already failed on the ground, which was a justification for my lack of integrity. And so as I filled my pockets with fruit, I would hop back over the fence and I would enjoy them in my own quiet time of seclusion. But one day I hopped over the fence and I began to collect apples, and there was Mr. Santos standing at his back porch, and he said, "Young man, come over here." And he said, "Sons, why do you steal from me on a regular basis?" And I said, "Sir, how can you consider this stealing when the fruit has already failed? And I'm basically helping you to pick up this and relieve you of that trash or that labor for my fulfillment. I'm doing you a favor." But he said something very profound that shaped my life for another 40 years. And what he said to me is, "Son, you don't have to steal from a friend who already cares about you and your family. If you want something from me, come to the front door, knock on it, and I'll let you in and give you all of the apples that you can possibly eat." I love Mr. Santos. And I'm kind of an introvert in spirit. I don't know if I want to knock on Mr. Santos' door, but I liked apples. So I went around and knocked on his door, just like the Lord, he says, "Knock, seek, and you will find me." And so I knocked on the door, and Mr. Santos, in his grace and kindness, would open it, and he would hand me a bushel of apples and said, "Here, take it. It's free. Take it away." And I loved him. And then occasionally we grew in relationship, and his wife would answer the door, he would open the door, and he would let me in. And they feed me breakfast, and I would eat, not say one word. And then they give me a bushel of apples, and I'd take it back. My parents figured, where are you getting all these apples? Mr. Santos. Mr. Santos became my best friend. And I love Mr. Santos. In fact, the day Mr. Santos died was the first death that I knew personally. And as his wife invited me to his funeral, I thought and I recognized what love really is. This man taught me a lesson around integrity. That yes, we can hop over the fence, maybe when we think people aren't looking, but at the end of the day, you know, and he knows of your lack of integrity. That lesson carried with me for life. And my father was a role model in my life. And we grew up at a time of tension in the United States. I grew up in the 60s and 70s. I grew up at a time very much like here in South Africa. When you talk about apartheid and you talk about the many different challenges in this country, I experienced that in Chicago, Illinois. I experienced a time where I couldn't go beyond a certain point, and there was boundaries and there was limitations socially and structurally, economically. But my father was a visionary, and he challenged us that we could make a difference. In fact, he challenged me that the marketplace was a powerful place of influence. And he said, Terence, it may not happen in my lifetime, but you, as a transformational leader, can have an impact on culture through the marketplace. And so I'm very familiar with this world that you're in. Because as a marketplace leader, the first principle that I came to understand as I grew is that your business is not your business. He's the owner, but he has given it to you to steward it. And my father gave me a very valuable lesson. He says, Terence, the business world is not about the brand, it's not about the shingles, it's not about the four walls. It's always about the people. They have intrinsic value. And if you come to appreciate the value that each of them have and learn how to maximize it, you not only can change the corporation, the community, but also the nation. And I believe that as a young man. And he began to take me to places that could expose me to the marketplace with leaders that I could never meet and say, this is what business is about. And I grew up with the thought that I could change the culture of America through the marketplace. I wanted to give you that context as I share with you these stories. Because I believe it today. I didn't go to work to be a leader, a manager, an owner. I went into the marketplace to change the very culture of the country. And my father gave us the dream that it could happen. I want you to think about this. There's 90 million businesses in the world. 90 million that we can count. In the U.S., there's 28 million businesses. If just 10% or that 6% that Anton shared earlier that may or may not be Christian, I'm not going to go there. I don't judge that. That's for him to judge. But let's just say it's 10% because it's easy for me to do the math at 10. At 90 million businesses, if 9 million business leaders like here at King Price existed in the world and reached 10,000 people each, we could technically complete the Great Commission through the marketplace. It's the most powerful platform in the world. You see the 3% in America that says, you know, I'm in church, I'm regular, but there's 60%, and I guarantee it's probably the same here. A large percentage who will never step into the doors of the church. And I'm a church guy, I'm a huge church guy. But they'll never step into the four walls of the church. But here's the good news. The average worker works 46 hours a week in the four walls and the cubicles of a business. Who has greater influence? The church at 6 hours a week in Sunday school, Bible study, 3-hour church session if you come from my world. Or the marketplace that has 46 hours of influence to make a difference. There's two powerful institutions, if you will, or platforms that I'm interested in, the family and the marketplace, because we spend the majority of our time in those two settings. And so my second example to you would be around the marketplace. I grew up in the marketplace. As a young man, I had my first business when I was 7 years old. And it was really motivated on the love of candy, I will confess. My mom and I were coming home from church one day. We stopped at a convenience store. I wanted candy. She didn't want to buy candy. So here's what she said, classic parenting. If you have some money, we will buy candy. I'm 6 years old. I have no money. But I looked at the counter and I realized that people were returning what we call in Chicago pop bottles, soda bottles. And they would receive 5, 10 cents for these soda bottles. And I knew we had a lot of soda bottles at home. And I said, Mom, would you be willing to kind of keep these soda bottles to the side? And so I really started my first recycling business at 6, 7 years old. I collected bottles, I put them in together. I went to the store and negotiated a refund strategy because I told him I'm going to bring a lot of bottles here. He agreed to that, and all of a sudden, I'm taking bottles to the store, getting 5, 10 cents a bottle. Mom taught me a valuable lesson at that point. She says, Terence, 10% have to go towards tithes. What's a tithe? It's that quarter that you drop in the basket when you're young. Mom, I don't know what a tithe is, but okay, if 10%, okay, fine. My father come right behind and says, Terence, 10% has to go towards savings. I'm like, hey, you guys are hitting me with this 10%. So they explained the 10%, but I realized I had 80% left. I knew enough about that. And so the 20% didn't sound too bad when I thought about the 80%. Guys, I was rolling in candy. I had more candy. I could have been a candy pusher. My body is immune to candy as a result of the early manifestation. And, I worked on this early, my friend. Well, I began to consume the candy and collect more customers, going to neighbors saying, hey, would you do the same? They said, yes. And so my franchise grew substantially. My friends saw my prominence, right, and they wanted in on the action. And I sold them a piece of my territory, and by the way, I charged them 10%. And so I became a franchise recycling owner. And I'm cashing in, I'm making big bucks here, a couple of $1,000s a month. No small change, my friend. Snickers, paydays. Hey, what can I say? I reminisce. But that's how I started in life. And interesting enough, the Lord took me into the marketplace because I had a love for the business side of things. I'm a business guy by heart. And my first company I went to work for was Johnson & Johnson. We make Tylenol products, McNeil Consumer Products Company, Tylenol, sinus medication, etc. And I was a territory manager in Chicago, Illinois. In Chicago and J&J, 3 months on the job, a week before training, September of 1982, the nation faced the most critical crisis that it had ever seen. A consumer packaged product had been tampered with cyanide capsules, and 7 people lost their life. That territory was my territory. I saw what it meant to be a transformational leader with integrity. Dr. James Burke was that leader for me. Dr. James Burke was the CEO of Johnson & Johnson. He was a man of integrity. Immediately, as we spent $150 million to recover, we lost 95% market share in 24 hours. And there was no branding strategy. There was no crisis management strategy in place. But Dr. James Burke said to all of us at that moment that this will be our finest moment in the history of this organization. He immediately formed a 7-man team to develop the recovery strategy for Tylenol. What most people don't know is that small company, McNeil Consumer Products Company, provided 46% of J&J's profit. It was a substantial hit. He could have done a lot of things. He could have said, hey, it's not our fault, it's someone else's fault, we don't know what to do. No, what he said to us, as the question was raised, Dr. Burke, we're spending $150 million. That's the cost that we're analyzing this to be. Dr. James Burke, in his most famous moment that I remember, he says, never again do I want to have the conversation of dollars when life is at stake. He said, this will be our finest moment. We are not only going to recapture the market share that we lost, we are going to exceed it, and we are going to change consumer product packaging forever. It happened through that one instance. And not only did we recapture it, he says, that young man in Chicago who's only 3 months and a week before training, you're going to lead those efforts in Chicago, Illinois at 21 years old. I have no idea why he would leave that up to such a rookie. But of course, we had the strategic team and the leadership team driving the initiative. But they left this young man, 21-year-old, who was naive, had no idea, no thought. And he trusted me with the greatest recovery crisis that this nation has ever seen. And the reason you have safety seal packaging is because of that incident that took place in 1982. And Dr. James Burke said to us all, there will never be a time that we will do the wrong thing. We will always do it for the right reason. So let's spend what we can, let's do what we can, but we will change the very nature of consumer products forever. We recovered in 3 months. In fact, we achieved 105, 110% of where we were. And that started my corporate career and my recognition within the organization. And in 8 years, 26 years old, 27, I led a quarter of the country for Johnson & Johnson. Promoted every 18 months, realized that by integrity, that we could make a difference. Never shortchange integrity. I learned that in a Johnson & Johnson publicly traded company. But what I learned was from a man who stood on a principle. And he believed that he lost it all in the fall. He gained it all on the cross. And he received it all for eternity. Let me take you through the next scenario that shaped my life significantly. When we speak of integrity, integrity is one word, but is this one that of many. But once you realize what's at stake when we deal with the level and the issue of integrity, it is never about just you. Integrity will always impact someone else. And I don't want to fail the one that he's given me to nurture and love. But I fall so short so often. The third scenario is that he taught me around integrity. It seemed to follow me through my career because I went to Citibank, recruited to Citibank after that, never thought I would leave J&J. But yet this recruiter kept recruiting me every year. And I said, one, I don't know banking. I don't like banking. Why would you recruit me from banking? He said, good, that's why we want you for banking. And I went to lead Citibank in Florida for 5 years. And I led the organization. And I'm thinking, why would you take me to the banking industry? You may recall that in 1988, we had one of the greatest financial crises that this nation has ever seen in America. It made 2001 and 2008 look like child play. The federal savings banks had collapsed. The banking industry was over. There was no lending. It was a disaster. And here it is, the Lord taking me to Citibank, the largest at that time financial institution in the world. They were losing about $600 million a year. And yet, we wrestle with this issue of integrity. Because when you're dealing with money, I've learned that when you're dealing with money, there is a deep-rooted element that leads towards corruption. We all want to achieve that one thing we think will make a difference in our life. It challenged our very core and that nature. I've seen situations where people will sell out their mother, their father, their children, their uncle, whatever, for money. It is a powerful source of integrity or lack of. And he put me in place in the largest banking system in the world. And I realized as we made decisions that dealt with integrity, I had to think about one principle that I want you to think about when you're faced with these challenges, because it's not if you're going to be faced, you're already faced with them every day, but you have already made the decision to be people of integrity, but you have to manage it daily. And so when we're faced with the decision of reporting a certain way so we can lend so much money, and when we're faced with a situation where there's integrity issues and we're trying to make it, I had to remember one thing. The mom or the dad who has saved for all of their life and they're walking across the street and they're looking for that money to come back in return that you have banked for them for many years, they're expecting those funds to be there. They're expecting those funds to be there. And so when I thought about that, I taught my staff that integrity is a non-negotiable. It is a principle that I want you to write down. Integrity is a non-negotiable. You see, as a business leader, it doesn't mean that you're better, as a Christian business leader, it doesn't mean that you're better than any other business leader, but you must be different. As a Christian business owner, it doesn't mean that you're better than any other business owner, but you must be different. And of course, we want to strive for excellence. How are you being different? Integrity is the core root of all of that. The third place in which he challenged me around my integrity is around the family. It's the one that I'm actually the most passionate about. You see, I've been in the marketplace. I've been at the highest levels. At Coca-Cola was where he took me to next. Atlanta, Georgia. We've been in Atlanta, Georgia for 22 years. I managed about 2/3 of the Coca-Cola company at 36 years old. $80 billion. And I looked at that experience, and I had achieved my most wondrous dreams and desires to go into the marketplace, to shape culture at a very high level. But yet, it left me unfulfilled. It left me empty inside because there's something greater. My integrity is not to be built to do good things and good works. It is to change the very fabric of society. That's why I want to be a man of integrity. Not because I want to sit there and say that I'm a good person, because I'm not. Because remember, I lost it all in the fall. But he did it all on the cross. So therefore, where do I give it all? I give it to him, his glory. He gets the glory. He gets the honor. He gets everything. Remember, I said that the decision on integrity is made once, but it's managed daily. How are you managing? Do you really believe that what you say you believe is really real? And so when I went through this life of family, my most precious commodity, I realized that even as a successful businessman, I was failing as a spiritual leader in my home. And on our 15th anniversary, my wife and I go off to a regular annual trip. And we begin to just talk about some things. And I had 3 questions that I wanted to kind of talk about. One, where we've been, where are we today, and where we're going. Now, that doesn't sound very sexy for, a honeymoon trip. But, I want to talk about that stuff. And so we began to talk about our life and where we had gone, the journey and the ups and downs and in between. And it was just so rich. And then we talked about where we are. And then somehow we got on the subject. Are the kids prepared to defend their faith after high school? You see, we had raised them in the church. We had raised them in God's word. We were trying to model it the best we could, but we were falling short in so many areas. In fact, we were growing and moving so fast that we never had a church home until our kids were like 10 to 13 years old. We never went to church consistently, although we loved the Lord. We never read the Bible on a consistent basis in the home, but yet we called ourselves a Christian. We never had family devotional time. In fact, during this time, I had become a youth minister in the church. And 90% of all the youth within that church was coming to my teaching and my sessions. You see, I was failing as a spiritual leader, and I knew that inside. Although people thought I was being successful on the outside. You see, when you face the demon of your life, the lack of integrity, all else began to crumble. There's a truth in your life that will come present when you're facing this issue of integrity. Well, that day I had to face it. And my wife turned to me as we answered the question, no, they're not prepared to defend their faith after high school. Why is this important? Because in America, 65% of our youth, they leave the church and faith after high school. It was critical for us. But our kids knew the Lord. But they were not growing in maturity in their faith. Hebrews 6:1 talks about moving from this milk and going on to this meat where there's a personal relationship where you know God, not just know of him. You see, I know you because we've met. I might even have your name, but I don't know you. I don't know your struggles. I don't know your issues, but I know you. But I not only wanted to be known by you, I wanted us to have an intimate relationship with one another. That's what he wants. And I was failing in that area. And so my lack of integrity, it doesn't deal with some issue or something I did or didn't do. It deals with my personal relationship with the Father. It is the most important integrity issue that I have. Am I fulfilling the integrity that I said I believed in him? That decision was made once, but it's managed for a lifetime, daily. Because I have to remember what he's done on the cross. It's an integrity issue that's bigger than us. It's bigger than this world. It's beyond us in this world. And so when I faced this issue of the kids prepared to defend their faith after high school, answer came back, no. She says to me in her way, well, what are you going to do about it? I'm like, what am I going to do about it? You're the spiritual leader at home. What are you going to do about it? I've abdicated that to the church. I've abdicated that to you. I'm off, growing up. I'm making the big money. So it's time for you guys to step up. And she said, that's not my role. That's your role. And in 2 weeks, I need you to come back and I need you to tell me, how are you going to turn this thing around? Ouch moment. Welcome to my world. You guys have no sympathy around that. I'm surprised that you guys, you just like, yeah, Terence, whatever. She should have told you that. Shame on you. Shame on this. Compassion. We need, next session, Dwayne, we need to have a session on compassion. We need compassion. So I go back, I'm thinking, oh man, what do I do? And it takes me to Ephesians 6:4. Fathers, really speaking to parents, don't exasperate your children, but what? Train and instruct them in the Lord. What does this look like? It's family discipleship. And I began to draft out this thing. What is this family disciple? How do I train them? And then I began to just look at verses and read through. I understood the Bible enough, and I looked at it and read and said, Lord, I need you now. And you know what he said to me? I can't use you at all. See, I can't use you to still think it's about you. The person I need is one that's dependent on me, sacrificial, sacrifice, surrender with great humility. That's why he says in 2 Chronicles 7:14, for those who humble themselves and seek his face. And so I had to humble myself and seek his face, his will. See, this wasn't a salvation issue. This was a calling on my life to be the father, the husband that he made me to be. And so I went back and I began to draft and map out. And I came up with this process to train our family. In fact, today, we still do it. Some 10, 15, 20 years later, our kids are now 20, 30 years old. And we still have family devotions every other week, conference line, 5 cell phones, and we're still talking about Jesus. We're still talking about Jesus. And it's the spiritual leader of the home. They're looking for me not to just come with business advice. Now, all of a sudden, they're asking me questions around spiritual advice. You see, I believe your life becomes imbalanced as you deal with 3 drivers. The first driver is a spiritual driver. The second driver is I call it an intellectual driver. And the third driver is what I call a physical or emotional driver. When your intellectual or your physical or emotional drive start to surpass your spiritual drive, you will find yourself in positions of lack of integrity, without a foundational base to go back to. Your spiritual driver has to exceed your physical and your intellectual drive. And that change started to take place in my life in a mighty way. And so we began to lay it out. I began to develop it in 7 quick areas that I'll go through very quickly because of time. The first area, I wanted them to understand where they had come from, the root that they had come from. We grew up in a very strong spiritual home, but really on my mom's side, not my dad's side. And the men had come to faith maybe 3 generations before, and all of a sudden we started to see major change within our family. And interesting enough, my generation was the 5th generation to carry forth the legacy on the men's side. But we found in our great-great-great-great-grandmother an old Bible where she had been praying for the men of the family. And this Bible was dated back to 1824. And all of a sudden, 3 generations back, our family journey changed dramatically. It wasn't an intellectual change. It wasn't a physical change. It was a spiritual change. And as I began to identify that and share with my kids the rich spiritual legacy that they had, but yet it's a personal relationship with God. We lost it all. He did it all. We get it all. And as I teach that, it has changed their life forever. The second piece of that is I had to have a vision for my family. We have a vision for business. We have a vision for everything we do. But here's the question. Do you have a written vision statement for your home? Do you understand the destiny that you're taking them to? Do you understand what's the end game here? We have it for everything else in our business, in our church. Do we have it a written spiritual plan for our home? And so mission, as you know, accomplished vision. And so we had to write down, what is our mission statement for our family? Do you have a written mission statement for your family? Do you know how you're going to achieve the vision that you say you want to lay out? You see, if I truly want to make mature and equip disciples who will go and do the same, then I need to have a process to get there. And the one thing I knew how to do, I knew how to write business plans. I knew strategy. I built companies. And I knew how to do that. And I just took that experience and I just put it into work in this challenge that my wife gave me. The third thing I'm going to challenge you with is, well, you got to map out goals. How you're going to achieve that mission. Do you have any type of structured goals in your home that's written? For us, we centered around 3 goals. We call it Connect Goals, Commitment Goals, and Commission Goals. Connect Goals deals with how do I teach what I believe and why I believe it to my children. You see, the world is interested in talking to your children. They talk to them in the way of the internet, Hollywood, and so many other ways. If you're not talking to them, I guarantee you someone else will. And so in our radio station, I wanted them to tune into was Chatmon.com. I wanted them to tune in to Chatmon 1790 FM. And so we're mapping out these connection goals. What do I believe? Why do I believe that to be true? Because I want them to know, consider, and present this gospel to them in a way that they get it. And I don't want them to get it from the youth camp. I don't want them to get it from somewhere else. I want them to get it in the home. And the second goal was commitment goal. Well, how do you live this out? Well, we had to model it first as a family, as a husband and a wife. How do we model this? And we don't model the fact that we're good parents. We model the fact that we are broken in our nature. We lost it all. But here's the good news, kids. He's done it all. And guess what? We get it all. You see, this foundation is going to carry. And in the third year, we deal with commission goals. Well, then it's not about me. How do we now give it all away? You see, if you just get more spiritually mature and you become a Phi Beta Kappa, we call it in America, of theology, and you can tell everybody every scripture in the world, so what? We wanted to teach our kids how to model this behavior, this Christ-like behavior, to go beyond them. It's not about you. It's bigger than you. He is working in you so he can work through you. And so those are the goals and then there was age and stage. Let's teach our kids, right? Because it's different teaching a 3-year-old than you do a 16-year-old. And so we begin to do that. And then we begin to teach them intercessory prayer. What does it mean to pray for a family member who don't know Christ? We're not going to judge them. We're just going to talk about it, and we're just going to pray for them. You ever heard of a praying grandmother? And now you have a praying grandfather. You have a praying brother and sister, uncle, aunt. And then we had a covenant statement. I love Patrick talked about a covenant statement. He has a covenant statement, a promise that he's made and the kids have made. And you know, the reason that we have our devotional is because we love spending time with each other and we love talking about God with one another. You see, I'm not wrestling with this issue of what do my kids think. I know what they think. I talk to them every other week from 8 to 9 on Sunday, whether I'm in South Africa, whether I'm in Guatemala, whether I'm in America. That call is more important to me than anything else I do. It's a reprioritizing of my life. Integrity is a reprioritization of your life because you realize that what? You lost it all. Who did it all? He did it all. And what do you get as a result? You get it all. And so when my kids think about this walk that we're making together and we're having together, they're seeing role models, mothers and fathers, but they're also seeing their brothers and sisters walking along this path with them, and they see a life of integrity at the cross daily, meaning we fall short, but yet the cross stands strong. It is our strength. It is our foundation. It is our rock. There is no guilt. There is no shame. There is no blame at the cross for us. He has taken it all away. What about your business? As a marketplace leader, where your staff and your employees are spending a major amount of time sitting around the cubicles, they're looking at you as a model. Are you making a difference? You see, as a businessman, I simply wanted to make a difference in people's lives who would go and multiply and make a difference. And that changes companies, guys. It changes organizations because they know that you care beyond the profitability. You see, I believe a business is more than just profitability. It's bigger than that. The profitability is just a fuel to run on. It's the heart of a man and a woman who cares about another man and a woman. Why? Because they have intrinsic value. The Lord has made them to be something great. And I want to bring that greatness out. Where does it start? In the spiritual drive. The final piece I will share with you as I go through this, it became my prayer that, Lord, never will another family member leave this earth without knowing who you are and what you've done on the cross. And we just thought we could train maybe 10,000 people. And somehow the Lord connected us with Focus on the Family, the largest family ministry at the time, when we certainly couldn't even spell Focus on the Family. And all of a sudden, through that movement, they say about 100,000 parents have gone through in some type of touching and some type of exposure to what I just shared with you. But here's the idea, guys. Less than 1% of Christians have a written plan for their family. But yet we say we want our kids to know who he is and what he's done. If we're going to be intentional in walking out this faith and walking out this life of integrity, being honest about what we say we believe, why don't we have this one written down? Why aren't we really being intentional? We write down a whole lot of stuff. We plan a whole lot of stuff. You are business people. You have a business plan. You have a vacation plan. You have a financial plan. You have an educational plan. You have plans, so you are planners. Why don't you have a spiritual development plan for your home? That has become a life beat. And through the John Maxwell organization, through Equip, we're trying to equip people in the marketplace, in the business world, government, where it doesn't matter. We're trying to equip them on principles that's greater than us so they can lead their life and the organization and their community in a different way. And we're trying to look at what we call transformational leaders. And the process we use is through a roundtable methodology, just like here, where you can begin to deal with the issues. But as you know, talking about transparency and authenticity, when you put it all in the center of the table, realizing that you could be ridiculed to the nth degree, and many people will use it that way. You realize that there's comfort in his grace because you lost it all. He did it all, and you get it all. So when you wrestle with this issue of integrity, I want you to write down those things that no one else knows. There's two people that know, you and him. They're known already. And there's one that you might say I would put forth and be transparent and authentic about. And not for you, but because you become a living testimony for someone else. What would it be? Once you discover that, you will find your moment of integrity. You'll find your moment of honesty. Because honesty is so deep-rooted. Integrity is so deep-rooted that you need something beyond you to uncork it. God bless.